Welcome to the deep dive. Usually when we talk about a legacy industry, there is this heavy expectation of pedigree.
Right, yeah.
It feels a bit like a gated community. Like if you want to make luxury Swiss watches, the assumption is you better be Swiss.
Oh, absolutely.
And you better have a grandfather who spent like 60 years hunched over a workbench with tiny tweezers or something like that.
Right, because the barriers to entry in those worlds aren't just financial. I mean, they are deeply historical. The gatekeepers rely on that history to sort of keep the circle small.
Yeah, you need the bloodline. It's clean, it's expected. But then you step into the deeply traditional, arguably very stubborn world of whiskey making.
Very stubborn.
And suddenly we are looking at someone who didn't just ignore the gates, they completely parachuted over the walls. So today we are taking you on a deep dive into a fascinating Danish audio interview. It's from the Whiskey Insider show. We are looking at a man named Torben Thornæs.
And this story is, well, it's the absolute definition of disrupting a legacy system from the outside.
Exactly. The mission for this deep dive is to extract the playbook of how a complete outsider used calculated naivety, some incredibly radical process changes, and pure community building to disrupt an industry that is, frankly, obsessed with how things have always been done.
Which is a tough mindset to crack.
It really is. So we are going to unravel a core mystery for you today. How does someone with zero distilling background create a single-farm whiskey that actually outscores traditional 12-year-old Scottish whiskeys?
It sounds impossible.
Right. And how on earth does he do it in a tiny Danish village of just 400 people?
The setting itself is almost a character in this story. I mean, the village is called Kagerup up in North Zealand.
Yeah, the hosts of the original interview actually joked that the town's population is basically 400 souls and a dog.
That's pretty remote.
It really is. They described standing outside the distillery and literally watching massive sea eagles circling overhead, just diving down to eat fish right by the water.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's this incredibly atmospheric, rustic backdrop for what is actually a highly calculated business venture. And, well, to understand that venture, you have to look at Torben himself, because he wasn't a chemist.
Right.
He wasn't a master brewer. He was a travel journalist.
Which, is a brilliant starting point if you really think about the psychology of it.
How so?
Well, as a travel journalist, he was constantly visiting wineries, breweries, distilleries. He had this deep, continuous exposure to the culture of these places.
Oh, okay, so he soaked it all in.
Exactly. He felt entirely at home in that universe, even if he didn't know the exact molecular biology of yeast or the chemical breakdowns.
But feeling at home in a winery and deciding to physically build a whiskey distillery, I mean, those are two very different things.
They're massively different, yeah.
He literally says he woke up one morning and just decided, this is what I am going to do. And this is the part I love. He openly admits that if he had actually known how incredibly difficult it was going to be, he might never have started.
That admission is crucial, really. What's fascinating here is how his lack of industry baggage actually functioned as a superpower.
Right.
In psychology, there is this concept regarding the burden of expertise.
The burden of expertise.
Yeah, when you know all the rules of an industry, you also know all the constraints. You know exactly why something supposedly can't be done.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
I've actually heard this described as taking on ignorance debt.
Ignorance debt, I like that.
Yeah, just like financial debt can help you build a physical business faster by giving you leverage.
Uh-huh.
Well, a deliberate lack of knowledge about industry boundaries can give you the psychological leverage to just jump out of the airplane and trust that you'll build the parachute on the way down.
Exactly. Ignorance debt. Because he didn't know those rigid historical boundaries, he had to figure out his own path from the ground up, just based on logic rather than tradition.
Right.
And you see that immediately in his search for a location.
Oh, for sure. The easy route, I mean, the route a lot of startup craft distillers take is to just rent a cheap, generic industrial unit.
Slap some equipment in a metal box on the edge of town.
Exactly. And just start making alcohol.
It's highly practical, and it keeps your overhead low.
But Torben passes on all those industrial parks. He spends ages looking at dilapidated farms until he finally finds this working 1923 farm with 75 hectares of land in Kagerup.
Which is a huge commitment.
Massive. Why take on that massive headache? Well, because he wanted to pursue a grain-to-glass or single estate philosophy. He wanted total control over the local ingredients.
You wanted the whiskey to taste like that specific plot of land.
Yes, exactly.
And while he had that sweeping vision, he was self-aware enough to know he lacked the engineering chops to actually build a working distillery.
Right, you can't just wing the plumbing on a copper step.
No, definitely not. So he brings in a mentor, Tony Dream Clark. Now, Tony has a great backstory himself. He was an IT engineer working in the Middle East who just decided to go to Scotland and found Strathern Distillery.
So another outsider who hacked the system.
Precisely. Tony helps Torben map out the initial layout, the production capacities, the physical flow of the distillery.
So Torben isn't just flailing in the dark.
No, he's channeling his naivety through a framework provided by someone who had already successfully bypassed the traditional gates.
And having that framework is what allowed him to start messing with the actual chemistry of the product, right?
Yeah.
Because he wasn't tied to the sacred rules of Scottish whiskey, he wasn't afraid to break the most important mathematical ratio in the entire industry.
Right, the 70-30 split.
Yes. If you ask anyone in the traditional whiskey world where the flavor of the drink actually comes from, they will quote you this industry standard, like it's gospel.
Oh, absolutely.
They say 70% of the flavor comes from the wooden cask it ages in, and only 30% comes from the original clear spirit, which is called the new make. The barrel is the undeniable star of the show.
Always.
But Torben looks at this and completely rejects it. He shifts his target to a 50-50 ratio.
Which is a seismic shift in production philosophy, honestly.
It sounds like a minor percentage tweak on paper, but I imagine it's huge in practice.
Oh, chemically and procedurally, it changes absolutely everything about how you run your stills.
I was trying to conceptualize this, and I realized it's basically like a chef cooking a steak.
Okay, I'm like you.
The traditional 70-30 industry standard is basically like a chef taking a fairly mediocre, somewhat neutral cut of meat and then just smothering it in a really heavy, incredibly overpowering, rich sauce.
Right, the sauce is the barrel.
Exactly. You're mostly just tasting the sauce.
Yeah.
But Torben is saying, no, I want to perfect the meat itself. If the raw spirit is incredible, you don't need to rely entirely on the heavy sauce.
That is honestly a great way to look at it. And to perfect that meat, Torben becomes deeply obsessed with the distillation process itself.
He doesn't want a neutral spirit.
No, not at all. He specifically engineers his distillation to produce a raw spirit that is highly flavorful, deeply fruity, and crucially what they call fat.
Wait, fat? We are talking about clear alcohol coming out of a copper pipe. How can a clear spirit possibly be fat or oily?
It comes down to how you manage the distillation run. When you distill alcohol, it comes off the still in 3 parts. You have the heads, the hearts, and the tails.
Okay.
The heads come first, and they contain really harsh, volatile alcohols that you definitely don't want to drink. The hearts are the sweet spot. That's the pure, desired ethanol.
And the tails.
The tails come last, and they are heavy, oily, and can be quite funky.
So a traditional distiller just wants the hearts, right? Keep it clean.
Exactly. They make very narrow cuts to keep just the cleanest part. But Torben widens his cuts, specifically dipping further into the tails to retain certain heavy compounds called congeners.
What exactly is a congener? It sounds like a medical condition.
It kind of does, yeah. Basically, these are the funky, flavorful chemical byproducts of fermentation.
Okay.
Traditional distillers often try to filter them out or avoid them because they're hard to control, but those congeners contain the heavy oils.
And what do those oils do for the whiskey?
Those oils literally coat the palate and carry a massive, complex flavor. The goal is to build a spirit that has broad shoulders, so to speak. A spirit muscular enough that it won't just get bullied and overshadowed by the wood.
Ah, so it can stand up and fight back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Creating that true 50-50 partnership.
Okay, so he builds this massive muscular spirit. But engineering that kind of liquid creates a new problem, right?
It does.
Because if he puts that aggressive, fatty spirit into a standard, gentle bourbon cask, the spirit would completely overpower the wood.
Right, it would be all meat and no sauce.
Exactly. He needed a cask that could fight back.
Yeah.
And that meant abandoning traditional oak entirely. Which leads us to what are probably his wildest gambles.
Oh, this is the part where traditional master distillers would probably start hyperventilating.
Seriously.
Torben decides to experiment with highly unusual casks, specifically local Danish oak or dansk egg, and even more radically, chestnut. Castange.
Chestnut. I mean, when you think whiskey, you think oak. Bourbon oak, sherry oak,
Yeah.
French oak.
Mhm.
Chestnut sounds like something you roast over an open fire. not something you age hard liquor in.
And there is a very good scientific reason why the industry strictly sticks to oak.
What's that?
Oak is structurally strong, it's relatively watertight, and its chemical breakdown over 20 years is extremely well understood.
Be predictable.
Highly predictable. Danish oak, on the other hand, is notoriously aggressive. It has incredibly high tannin levels.
Tannins, meaning the stuff that makes red wine dry.
Yes. If you leave whiskey in Danish oak too long, it extracts so much tannin that it becomes unpleasantly astringent.
Like mouth puckering.
Exactly. It dries your mouth out like chewing on an oversteeped tea bag, and it colors the liquid a dark amber incredibly fast.
Okay, so that's the risk with Danish oak and chestnut. What's the danger there?
Chestnut is highly porous. It breathes heavily.
Which means?
Well, this means a lot of oxygen gets in, which is actually great for flavor development, but it also means a terrifying amount of evaporation, which the industry calls the angel's share.
Oh, the angel's share.
Right. Your precious product literally vanishes into thin air, right through the wood.
So let me get this straight. He's working with one wood that turns the whiskey into a bitter tea bag, and another wood that just leaks the product into the atmosphere.
It sounds like a nightmare when you put it like that.
It really does. How does he actually tame these aggressive woods without ruining his perfectly crafted spirit?
Geometry and micromanagement.
Geometry.
Yeah, he uses small 112-liter new casks of these rare woods.
Why does the size matter so much?
Surface area to volume ratio. Think about it. In a smaller barrel, a much larger percentage of the liquid is in direct physical contact with the wood at any given moment. This means the chemical flavor extraction happens very, very fast. He only leaves the whiskey in these aggressive casks for 1 to 2 years.
That's practically no time at all in the whiskey world.
Right, but it's just long enough to extract those unique flavor signatures without, as he calls it, overcooking the liquid.
So he pulls the ripcord before the tannins can ruin the batch.
Precisely. Once he hits that perfect narrow flavor window, he immediately transfers the liquid into traditional 200-liter ex-bourbon casks.
Where do you get those?
He sources them from a highly trusted broker in Kentucky. These larger, much calmer casks allow the whiskey to mellow, integrate, and oxidize slowly without adding any new aggressive flavors.
So it's a highly monitored two-stage maturation.
Yes, very hands-on.
And the results of this mad science experiment are just staggering. During the interview, the hosts actually do a tasting session, and hearing their real-time reactions, it tells you everything you need to know.
The proof is in the glass, right?
Exactly. Let's look at the chestnut cask first. This one sits at a punchy 49.4% ABV. It retails for 695 Danish kroner for a 70-centiliter bottle that's roughly $100.
And they only produced 738 bottles.
A true hyper-limited small batch.
Definitely.
And it completely blows the hosts away. They don't just say it's good, they describe this massive wave of vanilla, a deep sweet warmth, and this really pleasant, non-aggressive dryness at the finish.
So none of that teabag astringency.
Yeah, right. It doesn't rip your taste buds off. It just sneaks around the palate. They ended up scoring this a 90 out of 100 for a 4-year-old whiskey.
Which is, frankly, an exceptional score for something so remarkably young.
They also taste something called the Balkan peat. For this one, he ages it in small Bulgarian oak. It starts off with a fairly heavy peat smoke, around 50 to 60 ppm.
And just to clarify for those who might not know, ppm stands for parts per million of phenols.
Right.
It's the scientific measurement for how smoky or peaty a whiskey is. 50 to 60 ppm is considered heavily peated. It's similar to the big, aggressive whiskeys from Islay in Scotland.
Right, but because of his two-stage process and that heavy, fatty spirit we talked about, it doesn't punch you in the face like an iodine campfire.
No, it transforms.
Yeah, it actually mellows down into this floral, honeyed, what they describe as a smoldering smoke. This particular expression actually won gold at the World Whiskey Awards for Best Danish Small Batch, and the host gave it an 88 out of 100.
It's ultimate validation. It proves that his 50-50 philosophy, combined with these hyper-specific wood management techniques, is yielding world-class results in a fraction of the traditional time.
Which brings up a massive, glaring question.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If chestnut creates such an amazing, unique flavor profile in just 4 years, a profile that is actively beating out 12-year-old traditional Scottish whiskies in blind tastings, why isn't everyone in Scotland using it?
It's the obvious question.
Are legacy distillers just too risk-averse? Are they terrified of losing all their liquid to the angel's share through that porous wood?
Well, they are definitely terrified of the angel's share. Yes, losing product is losing money.
Right.
But it raises a much larger question about the economics of innovation. Experimenting with rare woods, micromanaging a two-stage maturation process, and potentially losing entire batches to over-extraction or evaporation, it's astronomically expensive.
I can imagine.
For a legacy brand that is churning out millions of bottles a year, standardizing the process with reliable, predictable oak is how they protect their profit margins.
So they basically trade innovation for safety.
They have to. They have shareholders to answer to. But for a startup, taking these wild risks creates a massive financial hurdle. If you're losing product to porous wood and buying custom barrels, you're burning cash.
And whiskey is already a notoriously brutal business model, even without those risks.
The worst.
You have massive upfront capital costs, buying the farm, the custom copper stills, the grain, the rare barrels, and then you just wait.
Yeah, you literally wait.
Your product literally has to sit in a warehouse doing absolutely nothing for years before you can legally sell a drop of it. It's an inventory trap.
A huge trap.
All your cash is locked in wet wood.
Right.
So how did Torben actually survive this drought?
He comes up with a brilliant dual-track funding strategy. First, he makes a structural change to the business.
Okay, what kind of change?
He transitions his company structure into an AS, that's a Danish stock company. This allows him to raise a total of about 8 million kroner.
That's a good chunk of change.
Yeah, they did it in 2 rounds, first 4 million, then 3.7 million. This cash injection was specifically targeted at building up his inventory so he could keep the stills running at full capacity, laying down barrels for the future without worrying about paying the electric bill tomorrow.
Now, I want to push back on something here because usually when you see a new craft distillery open, they don't just sit around staring at barrels for 3 years. Don't they usually pivot to clear spirits?
Oh, absolutely. The classic startup survival move is to start churning out unaged gin, vodka, or aquavit.
Right, just so they have something to sell in the gift shop on day one to keep the lights on.
But the problem with that strategy is it's a massive distraction from their core mission.
How so?
Well, you end up spending half your marketing budget trying to convince people to buy a mediocre gin when you really want to be known as a whiskey company.
Exactly. But Torben entirely bypassed that distraction. He didn't dilute his brand with a rush gin.
Yeah.
Instead, he launches this second, incredibly clever financial engine, the investment cask program.
This is where he essentially crowdfunds his maturation.
How does that work?
Private individuals or groups can buy a whole cask of new make spirit from him at essentially the production cost.
Okay, so the consumer takes on the risk of the wait.
Yes, but the distillery stores and ages it for them. And here's the genius part. Thornæs Distillery retains the right of first refusal to buy that cask back once it's mature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when they do buy it back, they share the profits of the bottled whiskey with the original investor.
It's like flipping houses, but with alcohol.
That's exactly what it is.
You buy the raw asset, the distillery renovates it over 4 years, and you split the massive markup at the end.
Yeah.
This program is so successful that it accounts for 40% of his total production volume, alongside some bulk sales to other brands. He treated his aging whiskey inventory like a real estate investment for his fans. He literally monetized the waiting period.
And he really needed that domestic cash flow because his original business plan didn't entirely survive contact with reality.
What do you mean?
Early on, they tried to tackle the export market. They dipped their toes into international sales, and Torben freely admits it was cold.
Cold as in nobody was dying.
Exactly. The market was tough. There was a global dip in consumer confidence, and trying to push a new premium Danish whiskey abroad was burning too many resources with too little return.
So instead of beating his head against the wall and forcing a strategy that wasn't working, he pivots.
It's hard.
He pulls back from export and goes all in on the domestic experience economy. If he can't send the whiskey to the world, he decides he will bring Denmark to the whiskey.
He's brilliant.
He starts heavily promoting tours, deep dive tastings, and educational sessions right at the farm in Kagerup.
He demystifies the entire process for people. He brings them into the fold, explaining exactly what they are doing with the chestnut wood and the heavy spirit and why.
And this creates a level of fierce brand loyalty that export distribution simply cannot buy.
It really can't.
And this community building peaks with a guy named Thomas Gragart.
Ah, yes, Thomas.
Thomas is basically a superfan. He just shows up at the distillery one day, out of the blue, and says, "Hey, I love what you're doing. I can run tours for you if you want."
Just out of nowhere.
Yeah. Torben harnesses that pure enthusiasm and asks Thomas to build and run an independent community group. Now, Thomas runs the Friends of Thornæs Facebook group, organizing events and essentially serving as a massive organic ambassador for the brand.
If we synthesize all these moves, Torben didn't just build a product, he engineered a self-sustaining ecosystem.
Totally.
By combining the investment casks with the experience economy, he tied the financial success and the social lives of his fans directly to the perfection of his product.
They aren't just consumers buying a bottle off a shelf.
No, they are active stakeholders in his 50-50 philosophy.
It is an absolute masterclass in challenging the status quo. So let's bring this journey full circle for you. We started by looking at a legacy industry that felt like a gated community.
Yep.
We watched a complete outsider, a travel journalist, use his naivety not as a weakness, but as a major asset. His ignorance debt freed him to ask questions no one else was asking.
Which changed everything.
He challenged the fundamental 70-30 mathematical ratio of his industry, deciding to perfect the spirit itself rather than relying on the heavy sauce of the barrel.
He took calculated, incredibly precise risks with untested, porous materials like chestnut wood.
Right, utilizing that strict two-stage maturation process to capture lightning in a bottle without over-extracting those bitter tannins.
And he sustained that wild vision through the brutal, cash-poor early years by turning his most loyal fans into investors and brand ambassadors.
Skipping the distraction of making gin just to keep the lights on is the powerful reminder of the value of questioning how things have always been done.
It truly is. The gatekeepers don't always have the best answers, they just have the oldest ones.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over today. The whiskey industry is famously, almost pathologically, obsessed with time.
Always the age statements.
They market 12, 18, or 30-year age statements as the ultimate unquestionable marker of quality. But Torben proved that by innovating the process, by focusing fiercely on the raw ingredients, the creative mechanics of distillation, and the surface area geometry of rare woods, you can create an award-winning 90-point product in just 4 years.
It's incredible.
So ask yourself, what other industries, or maybe even areas in your own life, are blindly worshiping time spent as a proxy for quality? Where are you letting the gatekeepers tell you that something absolutely must take 20 years when a radical change in your process might actually get you there in 4? We will leave you with that. Keep questioning the gates.